Jim Bridger's remarkable reputation is built on his extraordinary contributions to the exploration of the American West. Known as an unparalleled guide, Bridger's skills and knowledge were highly esteemed by all who knew him. His innate abilities as a topographer were legendary. He had the entire Western landscape mapped out in his mind. Bridger's instinctive sense of location and direction was so keen that it was often said he could smell his way, even when visibility was poor. His mastery of planes and woodcraft made him adept at handling emergencies and overcoming obstacles, showcasing his resourcefulness in the wild. Bridger's skills went beyond mere survival. He could live for months on what the land provided, a testament to his deep understanding of the region's resources. Despite lacking formal education, Bridger could vividly and accurately describe any area he had seen. He could estimate the surrounding terrain with precision and create detailed maps of regions he had traversed, noting streams, mountains, and other obstacles accurately enough for others to follow without difficulty. As a guide, his expertise was unmatched on the plains. These attributes were highlighted by Grenville Dodge, a Union Army officer and intelligence chief for Ulysses S. Grant, whose endorsement provides a powerful summary of Bridger's legendary status. Bridger's contributions as a mountain man, expert explorer, and pivotal figure in the American West are well documented and celebrated. James Felix Bridger was born on March 17, 1804, in Richmond, Virginia. At the age of 8, his family moved to the western frontier of Illinois, where his father, a surveyor and innkeeper, ran a family farm near St. Louis. It was here that young Jim learned the value of hard work and developed a love for adventure. In January 1822, Bridger decided to leave home and embark on his westward journey. He found an advertisement in the Missouri Republican seeking recruits for the Rocky Mountain Fur Company, setting the stage for his storied career as one of the most iconic figures in the exploration of the American West. The company sought 100 men to journey with their fur traders and frontiersmen along the Missouri River and into the Rocky Mountains, where they planned to lay beaver traps. They offered $200 per year, though Jim Bridger didn't need much convincing. Bridger convened with General William Ashley, the company's founder and first lieutenant governor of Missouri. He and the other 99 men began the Upper Missouri expedition on the Missouri River in March of that same year. They traded gunpowder with the local Arikara warriors in exchange for 50 horses. But the fur traders' fortunes soon took a turn for the worse. A few months later, as summer arrived, a fellow trapper in Ashley's party named Aaron Stevens tried to sleep with an Arikara woman. In response, the young man's throat was slit, and the Arikara warriors attacked the trapper's campsite. Bridger escaped unscathed, and about 75 men managed to survive and retreat upstream. They soon joined forces with Captain Andrew Henry, his 250 U.S. soldiers, and hundreds of warriors from various Sioux bands. The group, which included famous frontiersmen Hugh Glass, Jim Beckworth, and Jedediah Smith, returned to the Arikara campsite, plundered the village, killed many of the warriors, and seized their supplies. Weeks later, Hugh Glass's infamous encounter with a grizzly bear occurred, adding to his violent folklore. Despite switching allegiances to Captain Henry, Glass defied orders to stay with the camp and went berry picking alone. While foraging, he was charged by a bear protecting her cubs. He fired his .54 caliber Hawken rifle, but it did little to stop the bear from mauling him. Another shot killed the bear, though it's uncertain whether Glass or one of the two hunters designated to find game, possibly Jim Bridger, fired it. The hunters alerted the rest of the party, and Glass was kept alive by torn pieces of cloth holding his wounds together. They carried him on a makeshift litter for days before realizing they couldn't be slowed by his injuries. Captain Henry offered a couple $100 to anyone who stayed with Glass until he died. Two trappers, John Fitzgerald and a teenager named Bridger, volunteered. Historians widely accept that this teenager was the legendary Jim Bridger. However, Fitzgerald soon convinced Bridger to abandon Glass, fearing the return of the Arikara warriors. They left, taking Glass's supplies, including his gun. Miraculously, Glass survived and later confronted Bridger at Fort Henry, warning him never to betray a fellow man again. Bridger took this advice to heart. In 1824, Bridger joined an expedition further west into what is now Utah. There, he became the first English-speaking white man to see the Great Salt Lake. At first, Bridger thought he had discovered the Pacific Ocean due to the lake's high salinity. He later realized it was a massive inland sea. Jim Bridger was awarded the title of Chief of Scouts during the notorious Powder River Expedition in 1865, which utilized the Bridger Trail. This was the same year that Bridger's Pass was etched into the folklore of the Oregon Trail. That year, he also married his third and final wife. Jim Bridger's first wife, Emma, was from the Flathead tribe. They married in 1835 and had 3 children together. Tragically, Emma died 11 years later due to fever. Shortly after her death, Bridger married the daughter of a Ute chief. She also died prematurely, this time in childbirth, just 3 years after their wedding. In 1850, Bridger met Mary Wasaki, the daughter of the legendary Shoshone chief Wasaki. They had 2 children together. Unfortunately, most of Bridger's offspring met tragic fates. His eldest, Mary Ann, was captured by raiders during the infamous Whitman massacre and died upon her release from imprisonment. His son, Felix, a soldier in the Missouri Artillery, died at an early age from disease. Josephine, another of Bridger's children, also died from an illness. Eventually, Virginia Bridger became her father's sole surviving child. Despite these personal tragedies, Jim Bridger continued to persevere throughout the 1850s. He spent most of his time employed as a guide for both independent expeditions and the United States Army in numerous conflicts, including the Utah War, 1857-1858. This conflict primarily involved the U.S. government and the Mormon settlers in the Utah Territory, arising from tensions over governance, federal authority, and religious autonomy. Bridger's involvement with the Mormons began as early as 1847, when the first settlers arrived in Utah. Tensions between Bridger and Brigham Young led to broader conflicts with the Mormon community. In 1853, tensions escalated to the point where the Mormon militia was dispatched to Fort Bridger to arrest him. Bridger managed to escape under the cover of night, leaving behind a stash of alcohol, which the Mormons destroyed, partly due to their religious beliefs and partly because they suspected Bridger of trading with the local native tribes. Angered by his forced departure, Bridger sought support from President James Buchanan, but the federal government initially showed little interest. However, as tensions with the Mormon government escalated, the U.S. military eventually formed an expedition to march into Utah, starting from Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Jim Bridger volunteered as a guide and chief of scouts for the expedition, led by Colonel Albert Sidney Johnston. One of the young scouts, William Frederick Cody, who would later become known as Buffalo Bill, saw Bridger as a legendary figure. Unfortunately, the expedition faced severe challenges, including rampant disease during the winter of 1857. And by the time they reached Fort Bridger, it had been burned to the ground by retreating Mormons. Despite these setbacks, Bridger and his companions eventually subdued the Mormon rebellion, although Bridger never received compensation for his losses. In 1859, Bridger joined the Reynolds Expedition, a mapping quest bound for the headwaters of the Yellowstone River. His encyclopedic knowledge of indigenous cultures, languages, and territories made him invaluable to the U.S. Army. Early in his life, Bridger made it his mission to gain respect from local tribes, creating alliances and learning their ways of life. However, by the end of the 1860s, relations between the U.S. and Native Americans had deteriorated, especially with the establishment of the Bozeman Trail, which cut through the hunting grounds of the Lakota. Bridger was appointed Chief of Scouts during the U.S. Army's efforts to establish forts along the Bozeman Trail to support the gold rush in Montana. Despite warnings from his peers, including Jim Beckwourth, about the impending conflict with the Lakota, the forts were built as planned, leading to the Red Cloud's War, 1866-1868. Bridger was stationed at Fort Phil Kearny during major conflicts like the Fetterman Fight and the Wagon Box Fight. By 1868, Bridger's health was deteriorating due to blindness, arthritis, and rheumatism. He retired to a farm near Westport, Missouri, where he lived out his remaining years. Beyond his survival skills and frontier exploration, Jim Bridger became a folk hero, known for his tall tales and fables about his journeys through Yellowstone, a place he often described with enchanting stories of marvels and mysteries. One such tale involved a type of clear glass in Yellowstone that distorted human perception of wildlife, making distant objects appear much closer. Another story was about a petrified forest filled with birds that sang petrified songs. Despite these fantastical tales, Bridger was a revered figure, respected for his knowledge and experience. Jim Bridger died in 1881, having lived a life full of adventure and shaping the American frontier. His remains were moved to Mount Washington Forever Cemetery,